Darkness. It makes us feel uneasy and even unsafe. Despite knowing that there can be nothing out there, most of us will have experienced discomfort while trying to sleep, wondering if that shadow could be something, and listening intently after you thought you heard something, despite knowing for certain you are home alone. Darkness has this eerie quality about it, yet more often than not, especially in modern times, darkness has no more secrets to hold. There is no boogeyman, there is nothing scary beyond the light. But what if there was? What if behind every shadow, every time the sun disappeared behind the horizon and the light retreats, something comes alive, murdering unprotected humans in horrific manners? How would society develop if darkness means death? So, for the sake of actually having humanity capable of weathering this storm, we will have these dangers only originate when fire is developed. Without fire, obviously, humanity has no chance of ever surviving a single nighttime. There may be a couple of natural light sources even during the night, but only very few which could actually sustain any form of human population, especially since early humans have to keep moving around to ensure that they have enough food. Fire makes humanity capable of moving around while staying safe from the dangers in the dark. So, the moment fire is understood by humans, and we are giving humanity across the world a bit of leeway here, the darkness becomes fatal. How does history develop from here? Well, the early nomadic humans would be the least directly changed. Once it is figured out that the darkness is dangerous, keeping a fire going would become the single most important task for a tribe. Shelter would have to develop in a significantly different manner, since normal shelter endangers the reach of light to your body. Setting up camp would be the priority, and camps would have to circle around a central point of fire, shedding light into any form of shelter chosen by the tribe. There would have to be dedicated firekeepers in every tribe, who sleep during the day, and during the night, keeping their fire going is the only concern. This status quo of human development would last for millennia. Much of human effort during the day is spent on gathering and storing dry wood and food, and the focus would be on returning home as soon as possible as the day starts to progress. Thanks to human error, lack of resources, sudden rain, or improper planning, many tribes would find their horrific end thanks to a prematurely simmered out fire. Humanity itself would become a bit less curious and adventurous, since staying away from home or venturing into the darkness would mean certain and horrific death. And then we would reach the agricultural revolution, where we can discuss how society itself is impacted by the dangers of the darkness. As humans learn how to cultivate their own crops, we come to the next stage of human society, settled societies. As villages develop, we need to, again, critically think about exactly how humanity would develop in this alternate timeline. Giving each family their own house would be horrifically inefficient and dangerous. It is very likely that human society develops in a much more communal way, with, depending on the size of the village, one or multiple large central sleeping areas. There would still be designated firekeepers to ensure the safety of all the villagers, and there would still be horrific accidents wiping out entire villages if something goes wrong. Imagine a village with multiple big sleeping shelters, and when you wake up in the morning and enter the second sleeping shelter, everyone in there is dead and gone in an horrific manner. But the danger of this scenario does not originate from just the night. It is of darkness in and of itself. Human architecture would need to be significantly impacted. It is extremely important that buildings have as many windows and even openings in the roof as possible. During the day, buildings could even be considered dangerous, since if the sun gets blocked out from projecting enough light inside, there is no alternative and you would simply die. Ironically, humanity in this alternate timeline would become more active during the night when compared to our own timeline. Keeping light going everywhere is a costly activity, and there would be much time dedicated to keeping the fires going and gathering enough dry material to actually accomplish this. This is not necessarily an easy feat, so when it got dark, for the most part, you might as well just go sleeping or something in our own timeline. But now, thanks to the sheer necessity of having to keep back the darkness, there would have to be light during the night every time, meaning that humans have the option to remain active during the night, at least to a limited capacity. After a while, we reach the age of specialization, city building, and the like. We have the development of governing structures and religions. To start with religion would have to focus on and answer the questions related to the darkness. Obviously, across the world, different questions and answers would be raised, but none of the societies we know in our own timeline exist now, meaning that we can't look at how specific civilizations of our timeline would have answered these questions. But in general, these are the conclusions I think humans will generally reach, since all humans across the world will have to answer the same fundamental questions about what is for them the simple reality of life. Darkness means death. Religion in general would likely focus on the difference or relation between light and darkness. Light is good, darkness is evil. Light is pure, darkness is troubled. Light and darkness need to be in balance. Or humans are meant to eradicate darkness itself wherever possible, etc, etc. There would be thousands of unique religion structures, but one thing most of them will share is an aspect about light and darkness. There would also be questions raised about why the darkness only targets humans. Why don't animals get targeted? This would lead religion across the world to differentiate in a substantial way between animals and humans. For example, humans have souls which are targeted by the darkness, but animals don't, so they aren't in danger. This wouldn't be called a soul everywhere, obviously, but there is something fundamentally different about humans that makes animals safe from the darkness. And then obviously, perhaps the most important question is why? Why is this happening? This is the most difficult to predict an answer to, and this is the question where the answers will depend most on the individual societies and their development. A popular explanation may be that the gods were angry at the humans for stealing or developing fire, and to punish the new humans for their arrogance, the gods made the humans completely dependent on their new invention. Obviously, another possibility is that the darkness itself, or what resides in it, is seen as a god in and of itself. Of course, there would be many differences and strange religious practices all across history. The harsher religions could very well have done things like sacrificing people to the darkness, pushing people into the darkness to satisfy it and keep it happy. Firekeepers would likely become a religious function in many societies, and they would be highly respected, both because of the new religious role surrounding their position and the sheer practical importance of it. This isn't some religious flame you can't let die out because it was once lit by your ancestors. This is a very practical flame that will cause literally everyone to die if it dies out. Then we have governance. It is unlikely that the fundamentals of rulership have changed, and god kings, chiefs, oligarchies, and theocracies would still be the most common forms of governance. But the focus of these rulers would have to shift and be a lot more focused than in our own timeline. The focus of rulers and our hierarchy would have to be in providing consistent light to the appropriate buildings, most importantly, keeping the sleeping halls lit up. Like mentioned before, due to sheer efficiency, it is very likely that the communal sleeping buildings would have survived, at least in these early villages and cities. Lighting a couple of larger buildings is way safer and more efficient than lighting many small ones. This, together with food supply, obviously, would be the great task of governance in this timeline. Giant disasters would happen across history, with things like volcanic eruptions and solar eclipses potentially wiping out entire percentages of the world population by unexpectedly plunging the world into darkness. But smaller scale accidents would happen way more frequently. Since you need light wherever you go, there has to be fire in things like ships and wooden buildings. It would be impossible to count the amount of times that wooden things accidentally catch fire, or the fire simply died out for whatever reason. The people of this alternate ancient world would become a safer place for settled peoples, where in our timeline the settled people became easy pickings for nomads who would ransack, conquer, and plunder them time after time. The nomadic people would be way weaker than in our own timeline, where organized society has a way of combating the darkness thanks to hierarchy, cooperation, and organization. The nomads don't really. Nomadic peoples would be extremely limited, thanks to the lack of suitable shelter they can construct and the amount of fire reserves they can build up and carry. It is not a fun prospect to constantly load up horses or humans with enough food and wood to be able to consistently keep your tribe safe at night. Of course, there would still be nomads, but they would be fewer in number and dangerousness. Warfare itself would also be impacted and become distinctly slower in this alternate timeline. Despite things like torches existing, light is still a fickle thing. Especially when taking things like horses with you, the logistical operation of marching through the night would become extremely difficult and not worth it in most cases. Marching through the night would become a thing for great generals to do and make a name with. An alternate great conqueror like Alexander the Great might be bold enough to light many torches and march through the night, surprising the enemy the next morning and winning the battle that way. But the norm is that warfare takes place during the day and stops at night out of sheer fear of the darkness. Then there is also obviously the added logistical element of an army on campaign needing to either constantly forage for enough dry materials to keep the fires going, or have a steady supply line of wood to keep the army safe. This means that army sizes and operational ranges would be severely limited, and warfare would have to adapt and become more of a local affair as a result. Mass conquest would become way harder, as a conquering army coming from far away is way more limited in size and movement than a local force would have to be. But, obviously, there would still be war and conquest. We are still humans after all. The darkness would likely play a symbolic role in many cultures' way of fighting a war, forcing defeated armies and rulers into the darkness, leading to their death, propagandizing the remains. Or, as a cruel way of intimidation or punishment tactic, you could take a city's wood and food supply, forcing the defeated city to light their own belongings or buildings on fire in an attempt to prevent themselves from falling to the darkness. Once food safety reaches a level that trade starts and specialization reaches a level where it's possible, we would have an increasing number of scientists. Obviously, one of the things that science would be primarily concerned with in this alternate timeline is light. Finding new, better, and more efficient ways of lighting the world to prevent death and devastation. Things like burning oil and candles would be developed way more quickly than our own timeline, and would first be utilized to light the elite's private housing, since it's very likely that most of the elites across the world would want their own private houses rather than join in the communal living quarters. But over time, we would see many of these developments making the task of keeping light in the dark easier and safer over time. But humanity will forever be different than we know it to be. And despite light becoming easier and easier to keep going, the darkness never sleeps, and the danger is never fully gone. It takes one broken light bulb, one gust of wind, to potentially kill everyone in a room. However humanity develops, accidents would still be abound, and no one, rich, poor, young, old, man, woman, would be safe from the darkness. From here it becomes more and more difficult to keep predicting and building upon this alternate society I have developed. I have no specific societies or nations to link this scenario to, since I have fundamentally altered human development from the very beginning, changing so many fundamental aspects that placing real historical societies in a video would be disingenuous. Society's progression is impossible to predict from this point, but the biggest question I still have about the scenario is how modern science would interpret the darkness. Assuming that as light gets more and more reliable, humanity keeps advancing technologically, which I have no doubt they will, how do things like cameras, especially the ones with night vision, change humanity? I don't know how the darkness kills humans myself, but whatever the answer, seeing it captured on camera is a terrifying prospect. Are there really dark and evil creatures just beyond the border of light, waiting to strike on any unprotected human? Or is there something more dark and mysterious at work? And without any visible threat, do the humans who enter the dark simply die? Whatever the answer, I'm not sure I would want to see it if I lived in this alternate scenario. But anyways, that's it for this year's Halloween special. I hope you all enjoyed it. I decided to take it in a bit of a different direction, instead of simply spawning in a scary mythological creature from history. But I hope you all still enjoyed it. It was one of my favorite scenarios to write. Let me know in the comments how you think the scenario develops from here. As always, to support the content, leave a like and a comment to help me against the algorithm. Even just commenting something simple like wow helps the video out massively. Again, thank you all for watching, and a special thanks to these patrons who help me dedicate more time and effort to the channel by supporting me monetarily. To help the channel and get early access to videos whenever I complete them myself, consider supporting me there. As an added bonus, you get added to this awesome animation.